I still remember that day vividly, the day when everything in my life shattered into pieces. It was July 12th, in the scorching heat of Fresno, California, the kind of oppressive, suffocating heat that made the air feel thick and heavy, the kind that made you want to hide inside an air-conditioned room and never come out. I, Everett Rowe, had just turned 30 years old and was still working as a warehouse associate for Amazon. It wasn't some grand dream job, but I was proud of myself for always being hardworking, always energetic, always the first to arrive and the last to leave the warehouse. My co-workers used to call me Everett the Clown because I was always joking around, humming random tunes while pushing pallet jacks between the towering shelves, trying to lighten the oppressive atmosphere of the warehouse even just a little. But that day, everything changed in an instant. Manager Sanders, the man who always had a stony face, whom I had never once seen smile, called me into his office. He slid the termination letter across the desk and said in a flat, emotionless voice, as if reading from a script, "The company is doing layoffs due to budget reasons. You're on 27 the list. Today is your last day." I stood frozen, my hands trembling as I held the paper, my mind spinning as if someone had just punched me in the gut. I stammered, "But, sir, I've been doing well, right? I've never violated any rules." Sanders just shook his head, not even bothering to look me in the eye. "It's not about performance, Everett. It's just budget." And that was it. 7 years of dedication, 7 years of sweat, all ended with one sheet of paper and a few cold sentences. On the drive home in my old Ford Ranger, I didn't turn on the music like I usually did. My mind was consumed by one single question. How am I going to tell my wife about this? The utility bills were piling up on the table, credit card interest was compounding like crazy, and the massive mortgage we had signed 5 years ago now rested entirely on my meager paycheck. Brittany, my wife, was a fiercely pragmatic woman, sometimes to the point of frightening me. She was only 27, strikingly beautiful with long golden blonde hair and clear blue eyes. The kind of beauty that when we first fell in love made me think I was the luckiest man in the world. She stayed home to take care of our daughter and occasionally did nails at home to earn a little extra cash, but I was still the main breadwinner. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white, trying to focus on the road while my eyes stung and my throat burned with bitterness. Over the past couple of years, Brittany's pragmatism had become more and more obvious. She would sit scrolling through Facebook and Instagram looking at friends showing off new houses, luxury cars, trips to the Maldives or Paris, and then let out long, heavy sighs. Every time I would just force a smile, put an arm around her and say, "Be patient, babe, I'm trying." But my be patient never seemed fast enough to keep up with the wealthy, glamorous life Brittany dreamed of. I pulled up in front of the small 2-bedroom house we had poured all our money and hopes into buying. It was just an old, run-down place with peeling paint in big patches and an overgrown front lawn because I was always working overtime and never had time to mow it. I took a deep breath, forced a smile onto my face, and pushed open the door. Zena, my daughter, was playing with her toy kitchen set on the living room carpet. When she saw me, she squealed happily, "Daddy!" She ran straight into my arms, her tiny arms wrapping tightly around my neck. I held her close, my nose burning, fighting back tears. Brittany was sitting on the sofa, phone in hand, her face cold and expressionless when I walked into the living room. "Everett, you're home," she said flatly without a trace of warmth. I set down the untouched box of takeout on the table, took another deep breath to gather my courage, and said, "Babe, I have something important to tell you." Brittany looked up, frowning in annoyance. "What now?" I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. "Today at the warehouse, the company did layoffs. I got fired." Silence. A suffocating, endless silence filled the room. Brittany slowly put her phone down, arms folded tightly across her chest as if holding back a storm. "Fired?" she repeated, her voice sharp as a razor. "Everett, are you serious?" "It's true, honey, I got laid off," I answered, my voice hoarse. "But don't worry too much. I'll find another job right away. I have 7 years of experience at Amazon. I'm sure I'll—" "Let's get a divorce," Brittany interrupted, her voice so cold it sent chills down my spine. I stood there, stunned, my mind blank, unable to believe what I'd just heard. What did you say? Divorce, she repeated, even sharper this time. I've had enough, Everett. I want a divorce. My legs went weak. I had to lean against the wall to keep from collapsing. Brittany, calm down. We're going through a tough time, but I'll figure it out. I promise I'll find a better paying job. We'll get through this. Brittany let out a bitter, mocking laugh that sounded almost horrifying. You promise? You've been promising for the last 5 years, and nothing has changed. I'm tired, Everett. Tired of crying over bills every month. Tired of lying to my friends that my husband is a manager when in reality you just push carts around a warehouse. Tired of watching our daughter grow up in a house that's about to be foreclosed on. Every word felt like a knife straight to my heart. Tears started streaming down my face. I couldn't hold them back anymore. But we're a family. You can't just leave me now. That's exactly why I have to divorce you? Because we are a family. Brittany snapped, her eyes red with anger and disgust. I haven't seen a bright future since the day I married you. I'm 27 years old, Everett. I don't want to spend my whole life slaving away to pay debts, living paycheck to paycheck. I want a different life. I deserve a better life. Zena stood huddled in the corner, clutching her doll, her big round eyes filled with terror as she watched her parents. I dropped to my knees on the floor, tears pouring down my face, grabbing desperately at Brittany's sleeve. Please, think about it again for Zena's sake. She needs both her mom and dad. We can't tear her world apart. Brittany stared at me for a long moment, her eyes unmoved. Then she turned away abruptly, picked Zena up and said in an icy voice, "She'll be fine with me. That's better than growing up watching her parents fight over money every day." No, Brittany. Please don't leave me. I tried to grab her arm, but she yanked it away so hard I nearly fell over. Don't touch me, she hissed. Then she went into the bedroom, opened the closet, pulled out a suitcase, and started packing her clothes and Zena's with quick mechanical efficiency, as if she had been preparing for this moment for a very long time. I sat collapsed on the floor, tears streaming, only able to repeat over and over, "Please, please reconsider." But Brittany never looked back. The sound of the suitcase zipper, the hurried footsteps, then the front door slamming shut. All that remained was dead silence. A week passed like an endless nightmare. I barely ate or drank anything, couldn't sleep, just lay on the sofa staring at the cracked ceiling while tears quietly fell. My phone was full of debt collection messages I didn't dare open. I called Brittany dozens of times. She never picked up. Every text I sent showed only a single gray check mark. She had completely blocked me. Then one Tuesday morning, frantic knocking on the door jolted me awake. I dragged myself over and opened it. 2 men in black suits stood there, one holding a briefcase, the other a small camera. The older one spoke first. "Mr. Everett Rowe?" "Yes, that's me," I answered hoarsely. "We're from Wells Fargo Bank," he continued. "This is a notice of asset seizure because your mortgage has been in default for more than 90 days. You have 24 hours to pack your belongings and vacate the property." I stood there like a statue, the yellow paper with bold red letters trembling in my hand. "But, can I get an extension? My wife just left. I just lost my job. I'll try to pay." The younger man cut me off, voice flat. "I'm very sorry, sir. Procedure is procedure." With that, they left, leaving me frozen in the doorway. I turned back for one last look at the house. The old sofa where Brittany used to lie watching movies, the dining table where Zena loved to draw and play, the bedroom that still carried the faint scent of her perfume. I went back to the bedroom, hastily stuffed a few changes of clothes into a backpack, grabbed the family photo from last year, when we were all still smiling genuinely, and walked out the door. My tears had long since run dry. An old moving truck carried me and a few pitiful cardboard boxes away from the neighborhood where I had lived for 5 whole years. Behind me, the house was sealed with bright red tape. I no longer had a home, a job, or a family. In just a short time, I had lost everything. I drove aimlessly, eyes blurred with tears that kept welling up. Fresno now looked alien to me. Even the familiar streets seemed to mock my face. I pulled into a cheap motel off the highway and paid $50 for one night. Almost the last cash left in my wallet. The room reeked of old cigarette smoke. The mattress sagged deeply and the roar of semi-trucks thundering past the window never stopped all night. I lay there staring at the stained ceiling, my mind completely blank. I thought about Zena. Where was she sleeping tonight? Was she crying for her daddy? I thought about Brittany. How could she turn her back so fast? And I thought about my adoptive parents, Reed and Cora Rowe, who lived on the outskirts of Bakersfield, just over an hour's drive away. They were the last lifeline I had left in this world. True, their love had always been cold and conditional while I was growing up, but at least they had raised me, given me a name, and put a roof over my head. I told myself that in a moment of crisis like this, they would surely open their arms to me. Dad Reed was gruff, but he always said, "A man has to stand on his own 2 feet," so he would probably give me some advice. Mom Cora complained a lot, but she was still my mother. Surely she would feel sorry for her son who had fallen into the abyss. And Finn, my younger brother, even though he was rude, had grown up under the same roof. He wouldn't let his big brother sleep on the street. The next morning, I scraped together the last of my change to buy a box of donuts and 2 cups of black coffee, then drove straight to their house. On the way, I kept telling myself to stay calm, to explain everything gently, not to let them think I was a complete failure. I would say this was only a temporary rough patch, that I would get back on my feet soon and repay them tenfold. In my head, I pictured Mom Cora hugging me, Dad Reed patting my shoulder and saying, "Come inside, son, Mom and Dad are here." Just imagining that scene warmed my heart a little. My adoptive parents' house sat at the end of a red dirt road, a single-story ranch-style home they had lived in long before they took me in. The front yard was still neat as always. Mom Cora was terrified of what the neighbors might say. I parked, took a deep breath, picked up the box of donuts and knocked. The door opened. Dad Reed stood there, tall and imposing, his white hair cropped short, his weather-beaten face deeply lined. He was wearing a tank top and old shorts. His narrow eyes scanned me from head to toe with a coldness I had never seen so clearly before. "Everett?" he said in his gravelly voice, showing neither surprise nor pleasure. "Hi, Dad." I forced a smile and held up the box. "I brought some breakfast." He didn't take it. He just stood blocking the doorway, arms folded across his chest. Mom Cora appeared behind him, her chestnut brown permed hair perfectly in place, makeup carefully applied even though she was just at home. She looked at me, her gaze sliding from my messy hair down to my muddy shoes, then wrinkled her nose as if she smelled something foul. From inside the house, Finn poked his head out. My 24-year-old adoptive brother, chubby, long hair tied in a ponytail. He leaned against the doorframe with his arms crossed, smirking like he was waiting for a good show. I swallowed hard and tried to keep my voice steady. "Mom, Dad, I've hit some trouble. I lost my job, then Brittany. She left and took Zena with her. The bank foreclosed on the house. I have nowhere else to go. I'm only asking to stay a few weeks. I'll find a new job, I swear." Silence. A heavy silence so thick I could hear the ceiling fan whirring inside. Mom spoke first, her voice shrill and dripping with contempt. "Stay here? So now you remember your parents, huh? I thought you were too good for us, married a pretty wife, had a kid, moved out on your own." I lowered my head, voice trembling. "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't want to bother you, but I really have no other choice." Dad roared like thunder. A grown man lets his wife walk out, loses his house, and comes crawling back to live off his parents. "How old are you, Everett?" 30, not 3. Take care of your own damn life and stop dragging your loser face here to embarrass me in front of the neighbors." I staggered back a step, my heart squeezed as if in a vice. "But Dad, I'm your son." Mom gritted her teeth and jabbed a finger in my face. "Son? You've only ever been a burden? What have you ever done right? Dropped out of school, got fired from jobs, married a woman who left you? And now you show up drowning in debt so the whole neighborhood can gossip. I'm ashamed of you." Finn finally spoke, his voice high-pitched and mocking. He stepped forward to stand beside our parents, arms still crossed, smirking wider. Well, look who's home, big brother. What's wrong? Ran out of money already. Even strays know how to crawl back to the nest, huh?" I stood frozen, stammering, "Finn, what the hell are you saying?" He laughed louder and pointed straight at my face. "Stray, you're not even blood. You really thought you were their real son? Mom and Dad picked you up from the orphanage just for kicks. Who knew they'd end up raising such a useless piece of trash?" Dad nodded slowly, his voice low but vicious. "Finn's right. Your mother and I made a mistake for 30 whole years. We took in a parasite who brought nothing but bad luck to this family. And you still have the nerve to show your face here?" Mom piled on, practically screaming, spit flying. "Get out! Get the hell away from my house. Don't let the neighbors see you standing here one more second. I don't have a son like you." I backed away, my head spinning, tears pouring not from sadness, but from the deepest betrayal. I, the baby abandoned at birth, finally understood the brutal truth. I had never once been truly loved in this house. All the times they called me a freeloader, all the times they compared me to Finn, all the times they left me out on holidays. Now it all made horrible sense. I turned around without another word. Finn's mocking laughter echoed behind me, Mom Cora's shrill curses ringing in my ears. I walked back to the truck, hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the keys. I drove off not knowing where I was going, tears blurring the windshield completely. The feeling of betrayal tore my heart into shreds. I no longer had an adoptive family. I no longer had anything at all. The truck lurched and swayed along the red dirt road that led back to the highway, kicking up clouds of dust behind the tires. I don't remember how long I drove. I only know that when I finally stopped, night had fallen completely and I was already on the outskirts of Bakersfield. I found the seediest motel in town. The owner was a half-blind old woman who handed me the key to room 12 without even glancing at me. The room was exactly what I expected. Paint peeling off in huge flakes, ceiling covered in yellow-brown water stains, carpet so old it reeked of stale cigarettes and cheap 1990s perfume. There was a single sagging bed in the middle, a rotting wooden table and an ancient TV that didn't pick up a single channel. I collapsed onto the mattress. The springs groaned loudly as if complaining on my behalf. That first night I lay staring at the ceiling until dawn, unable to sleep for even a minute. The days that followed were a repeating nightmare. Every morning I woke at 5, put on the only clean clothes I had left, and drove around Fresno and Bakersfield submitting applications. Amazon, Walmart, Target, small warehouses, packing plants, even fast food joints. Everywhere I went, they shook their heads. "We'll call you" was the sentence I heard most often, but my phone never rang. Some were brutally honest. "You were just laid off by Amazon in the cutbacks. We don't hire anyone from that list." I'd return to the room, sit staring at the ceiling and wonder what I had done so wrong for the entire world to turn its back on me at once. Eventually, I swallowed my pride and took whatever odd jobs I could find. Moving furniture for people relocating, boxes so heavy my shoulders felt like they would tear apart. Cleaning construction sites, breathing dust all day, my back aching like it was broken. Some days I waited tables at a Mexican diner, others I washed cars at an automated car wash. Each day I earned $40 or $50, enough for 2 cheap meals in the room. I lost weight fast. My eyes grew dark circles, my hands became calloused and rough. Every night when I dragged myself back to that dark, dingy room, I sat on the creaking bed, turned on the sickly yellow desk lamp, and stared at the 4 moldy walls, asking myself, how did my life fall to the absolute bottom so quickly? Just a few weeks ago I had a wife, a daughter, a house, a steady job. Now I was nothing but a 30-year-old homeless man sleeping in a filthy motel and living on sandwiches. The emptiness of the room left me no place to hide. Questions I had buried deep since childhood now surged up like a broken dam. Who were my real parents? Why did they abandon me? Why was I placed with the Rose, a family that never once saw me as their son? Childhood memories came flooding back, piece by sharp piece, cutting like knives. I remembered scorching summer afternoons when Finn was taken to the park by Mom Cora, while Dad Reed kept me home to wash the car, mow the lawn, and clean every single window. I was only 8, my tiny hands clutching a huge brush to scrub the tires, sweat pouring down my face. "Hurry up, kid, stop being lazy," Dad Reed would yell from the sofa, eyes glued to the TV. I remembered family dinners where I was always served last. Mom Cora would put the best piece of meat on Finn's plate, then look at me coldly. "Eat less. Who do you think you are, trying to eat like a real son?" Finn would laugh loudly and mimic her. "Exactly. An orphan ought to know his place." I remembered summer vacations when the whole family went to the beach or the mountains and I was shipped off to Mom Cora's parents. They barely spoke to me. I sat alone, eating cold leftovers, staring out the window at neighbors walking their kids to the park, tears falling without me noticing. My childhood was nothing but eating, studying, and loneliness. No one ever asked if I had a good day at school. No one hugged me when I fell and scraped my knee. No one came to watch me play soccer even though I was the starting striker for the school team. Finn was the opposite. Every one of his games, the whole family showed up cheering, Mom Cora even making banners to wave. High school was worse. Finn and his friends turned me into their punching bag. They shoved me into trash cans, poured water on me in the bathroom, called me the Rowe family bastard. When I told Mom Cora, she just shrugged. "You get bullied because you're weak." Dad Reed bellowed, "A real man fights back." Useless. When I started working at Amazon, I thought things would finally change. I sent money home every month, hoping they'd be proud. They weren't. Mom Cora took the cash and said, "Consider it repayment for raising you." Dad Reed used it to go drinking and still yelled, "Bragging about that pathetic salary?" Finn sneered, "Proud of your Amazon pocket change? Still expecting Mom and Dad to carry you? Classic parasite." I had spent my entire life trying to earn their love and recognition, only to realize I had always been nothing more than a mistake they were forced to endure. Those dark memories clung to me, dragging me deeper into the abyss, until one night in October. It was almost midnight. I was sitting on the bed, hugging my knees, staring blankly into space, when suddenly there were 3 calm, measured knocks at the door. My heart pounded. Who could it be at this hour? The motel owner? The police? I stood up, hands shaking, and opened the door just a crack. A tall man stood there in a thick wool overcoat, collar turned up, covering half his face, looking polished and completely out of place. He appeared to be in his 50s, silver hair cut short, sharp brown eyes. He gave a small, polite smile and spoke in a low, warm voice. "I'm very sorry for the late hour. Are you Everett Rowe? I have something extremely important to discuss with you. 10 minutes, that's all." I was wary, still gripping the doorknob, but for some reason I opened the door wider and stepped aside. "Come in." He entered. A subtle masculine cologne followed him, completely at odds with the room's moldy stench. He sat on the only chair. I sat on the edge of the bed facing him. He reached into his coat pocket and handed me a business card. Thick stock, gold-embossed letters. Parker Price, Senior Attorney, Price & Associates Law Offices. "My name is Parker Price. I am the personal attorney for Mr. Alfred Veilstone, founder of the Veilstone Group, currently residing in Jackson Hole, Wyoming," he said slowly and clearly. I took the card with slightly trembling fingers. The name Alfred Veilstone rang a bell. "You mean the billionaire Alfred Veilstone, the one who founded the famous Veilstone Group in Wyoming?" I asked. Parker nodded gently. "But I have no connection to him whatsoever." "You must have the wrong person," I said firmly. Parker looked straight into my eyes, his gaze softening as though choosing every word carefully. "No, Everett, I'm not mistaken. Mr. Alfred Veilstone is your biological father. He has been searching for you for many years. He is now very ill, terminal cancer. Before he passes, he has only one wish, to see his son just once." The world around me stopped spinning. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears, my heart pounding in my chest. Biological father? I repeated hoarsely. What are you talking about? I'm an orphan. I was adopted by the Rowe family. That is correct, Parker nodded slowly. But the Rowes did not adopt you in the way you believe. You should meet Mr. Alfred and speak with him directly. He will give you all the answers. I sat frozen, my mind reeling. My real father was a billionaire? He had been looking for me all these years? It sounded like the plot of a cheap movie. Impossible, unreal. Parker placed a hand on my shoulder, his voice gentle but firm. I know this is a lot to take in. Here is my card. Whenever you're ready, tomorrow next year, call me. But please remember, Mr. Alfred doesn't have much time left. He only wants to see his son once and to apologize for not being there for you these past 30 years. He stood, shook my hand firmly, and walked to the door. It closed softly behind him, leaving me alone in the damp, moldy room, still clutching the business card. My heart raced wildly, my thoughts a chaotic storm, unable to focus on anything except one single idea. I am the son of a billionaire. My real father is waiting for me, and he is dying. I didn't sleep that night, nor the many nights that followed. I lay on the sagging mattress, eyes wide open, staring at the cracked ceiling while that business card sat neatly on the table like a ticking time bomb. Every time I closed my eyes, the face of a man I had never met appeared, sometimes smiling, sometimes crying, sometimes dissolving into darkness. I asked myself 1,000 times, what if I don't go? What if I go and get abandoned again? What if this is all just a cruel trick? But deep inside, I knew I couldn't run forever. I had to face it, if only to know the truth. On the 7th day after Parker Price's visit, I picked up the phone. My hands shook so badly I had to dial the number 3 times. It rang twice before the other end answered. Hello, Parker Price speaking. His voice was still the same low, warm tone from that night. I swallowed hard. It's Everett Rowe. A second of silence, then a soft, genuinely joyful laugh. Everett, I've been waiting for this call for days. Are you all right? I want to meet Mr. Alfred, I said, my voice trembling. That's wonderful, he replied at once, emotion thick in his words. I'm sending the address and detailed directions right now. You can come anytime, but I strongly suggest sooner rather than later. He doesn't have much time left. The text arrived seconds later. An address in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, driving instructions, and a short line. The main gate will open when you arrive. I'll be waiting. I stared at the screen for a long time, then stood up and started packing. There wasn't much to pack. A few old shirts, a toothbrush, the creased family photo of Brittany, Zena, and me. I stuffed everything into my backpack. I paid the motel for another week to hold the room, climbed into my beat-up Ford Ranger, and pointed north. The drive took nearly 16 hours. I drove through the night, stopping only for gas and black coffee at roadside stations. Wyoming appeared before me on a freezing autumn morning. The snow-capped Grand Tetons rising in the distance, Jackson Lake glittering like a mirror in the early sun. I had never seen anywhere so beautiful. It hurt. This was where my biological father had lived his whole life, while I grew up in moldy apartments and dusty warehouses. The private road to the Veilstone estate wound through towering pines. When the massive wrought iron gates finally appeared, I had to pull over for a minute just to breathe. The gates were at least 5 meters tall, intricately carved, flanked by stone walls that enclosed hundreds of acres. I pressed the intercom as instructed. A camera turned silently and the gates opened without a sound. The paved drive curved through the forest, then suddenly opened into a small valley. The palace rose before me. A 3-story gray stone main building with weathered copper-green roofs, 2 sprawling wings, an infinity pool, and an English rose garden still blooming despite late autumn. In front of the entrance stood a marble fountain crowned by a bronze angel. I parked in the courtyard feeling like a beggar who had stumbled into a royal palace. A middle-aged man in a black suit was waiting on the front steps. He bowed slightly. "Master Everett, I am Charles, the butler. Please follow me." I followed him through towering oak doors. The interior was even more overwhelming. Polished Italian marble floors, a ceiling painted with Renaissance-style frescoes, Swarovski crystal chandeliers sparkling in the sunlight. The faint scent of sandalwood mixed with the sterile smell of medicine. We walked down an endless hallway lined with huge original oil paintings. Every footstep echoed absurdly loud. I kept my head down, clutching my backpack straps, wondering if I truly belonged here at all. Charles stopped before an intricately carved walnut door. He knocked twice, then opened it. "Please come in. Mr. Alfred is waiting." I stepped inside. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst. The room was enormous, yet heavy with the smell of medicine and the rhythmic hiss of an oxygen machine. In the center stood a large hospital bed surrounded by state-of-the-art equipment. Lying there was an old man with snow-white hair, gaunt cheeks, and pale skin. But his steel-gray eyes lit up the moment they saw me. It was Alfred Veilstone. He tried to sit up, managed only a slight movement, and reached out with trembling skeletal hands. Tears were already rolling down his cheeks. "Everett, my son, it really is you." I froze in the doorway, throat locked tight. "Dad? Sir? Or just a stranger who happened to share my blood?" I was terrified that if I stepped forward, everything would vanish like soap bubbles. Alfred began to cry openly, his voice weak but overflowing with emotion. "Come here, son. Please let me see you clearly." I walked forward as if in a dream, each step heavy as lead. I sat on the chair beside the bed, an ocean of space between us, though we were only a meter apart. Alfred reached out and touched my cheek. His hand was ice cold but shaking with joy. "You look so much like your mother. Those eyes. Aurora had the exact same eyes." I couldn't hold it back anymore. Tears poured down my face. Alfred gripped my hand tightly and began to speak in a hoarse, laboring voice, forcing out every word. He told me that when he was 25, he had just returned from Europe to take over the family empire. Aurora was a 20-year-old maid, beautiful, gentle, always smiling. They fell deeply in love in secret within these very walls. Stolen afternoons in the rose garden, nights hidden in the old library. Their love burned fiercely but was forbidden from the start. When his parents, Mr. and Mrs. Veilstone, discovered it, they immediately fired Aurora and banished her to a remote ranch in Montana, cutting off all contact. Alfred fell apart and searched everywhere, but to no avail. He thought she had left him forever. 4 years ago, when doctors told him he had terminal lung cancer, the butler Charles finally revealed the truth. More than a year after being driven away on a stormy night, Aurora had returned to the estate with a baby only a few months old. She left the infant, me, in a wicker basket at the gate with a handwritten letter. "This is Alfred Veilstone's flesh and blood. Please take care of our son." Then she disappeared forever. No one knew where she went or whether she was alive or dead. The butler, terrified at finding a baby on the doorstep, didn't dare bring me to Alfred. Instead, he followed protocol and reported it to the elder Veilstones. They didn't want their son to know of my existence, so they secretly placed me with a poor family in Fresno, sent monthly payments to keep them quiet, and ordered that the truth never be revealed. My father paused, gasping for breath, eyes red. He squeezed my hand harder. When Charles told me, I thought I had died and come back to life. I didn't know I had a son. Once I learned the truth, I hired people to search every orphanage and adoption record. It took years, but we finally found you just weeks ago. He sobbed like a child. "I'm sorry, son. I didn't know. I wasn't there for you. I couldn't protect you or your mother." Hearing it all, my heart twisted. Anger toward his parents who had torn us apart. Pity for the dying man before me. Pain for 30 years of lies and being treated like a burden. And fear that this was only a dream, that I would wake up alone again. Alfred wiped his tears, voice faint but resolute. "I want to claim you as my son, Everett. I want to make it right even if I only have months or weeks left. I want you to carry the Veilstone name. I want you to have everything that should have been yours from the beginning." I looked at him, my heart so chaotic I could barely breathe. I stood up, voice choking. I need time. I don't know how to process all of this yet." He nodded, tears still falling. "I understand. But please come back. I don't have much time left, son. I just want to be with you for whatever days I have." I walked out of the room, legs heavy as lead. Charles led me back through the endless corridor, past priceless paintings and ancient vases that could have bought my entire old life 100 times over. When I stepped outside, I realized I had been crying the whole time. I sat in the truck, gripping the steering wheel, watching the massive estate disappear behind the pines. I had found my origin, but the answer still hung suspended in midair. In the days that followed, I lived like a sleepwalker. I returned to my old motel on the outskirts of Jackson Hole. Every night I lay staring at the cracked ceiling, replaying every word Alfred had said, every tear that had rolled down his face. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. The fault wasn't his. He was a victim too. A victim of his own parents, of their obsession with status, of secrets buried for 30 years. The ones truly to blame were the people who had torn us apart, not the dying father lying there waiting for me. And then he started calling. The first time was the very next evening after our meeting. My phone buzzed with an unknown number. I answered, and that familiar hoarse voice came through. "Everett, are you asleep yet? I just wanted to hear your voice for a moment." I was silent for a few seconds, then answered, "I'm not asleep. Is something wrong, Dad?" From that day on, he called every single day, sometimes 2 or 3 times. He asked what I had eaten, whether I was sleeping well, if the Wyoming weather was too cold today. He sent money, the first time $5,000 wired straight to an account I hadn't touched in years, along with a message. "Don't refuse it, son. I just want to make up even a tiny bit for what you should have had all along." I thought about sending it back, but then I remembered my empty stomach and the rent that was almost due. I kept it, and it hurt. That care, however late, was so genuine it melted something inside me. No one had ever worried about me like that, whether I'd eaten 3 meals, whether I was warm enough, whether I was taking care of myself. Brittany had asked, but only when she still needed me. My adoptive parents never had. I started visiting him more often. At first once a week, then 3 or 4 times a week. I sat by his hospital bed and told him about the childhood spent being despised, about sleeping on the sofa because Finn had taken my room, about being called a parasite in front of relatives. I told him about Brittany leaving, about Zena, whom I missed so much it felt like madness. Alfred listened without interrupting, just holding my hand tightly. Sometimes he cried openly. Sometimes he turned away so I wouldn't see him wipe his tears. "I'm sorry, son," he repeated like a prayer. "I should have found you sooner." I slowly grew used to the estate, used to Charles bowing every time I arrived, used to the scent of pine and roses in the hallways, used to having hot, delicious food waiting even if I only stayed a few hours. I started smiling more, sleeping better, and for the first time in years I felt truly loved. But the peace didn't last. One late autumn afternoon I left the estate later than usual. Alfred had fallen asleep after his pain medication. I kissed his forehead gently and slipped out. As I stepped into the grand marble foyer, I froze. 2 people stood in the middle of the floor. The woman was about 55, hair perfectly curled and dyed golden blonde, dripping with glittering jewelry, wearing a designer dress that hugged her still trim figure. That was Magnus Veilstone, Alfred's legal wife. Beside her stood Knox, my half-brother. He was around 28, tall, coldly handsome, wearing an expensive leather jacket, a Rolex flashing on his wrist. They both turned and looked at me like I was a fly that had wandered into a royal banquet. Magnus smiled, a smile so fake it sent chills down my spine. "Oh, this must be Everett, right? My husband's surprise son?" Knox folded his arms, scanning me from head to toe as if pricing junk at a flea market. I nodded stiffly. I'm Everett. Hello, ma'am. Hello. Magnus stepped closer, her heavy perfume suffocating. So I hear you're Alfred's biological son? What a shock. And you show up right when he's at his sickest. How miraculous. Her voice dripped honey, but every word was a needle. Knox smirked and added, Exactly, Mom. He must have studied Dad's medical schedule very carefully to pick this perfect moment to play the long-lost son, huh? The Veilstone fortune is huge. Who wouldn't want a piece? Blood rushed to my face, but I forced myself to stay calm. I didn't come for the money. I just wanted to know who my real father is. Magnus let out a high, tinkling laugh that echoed through the hall. Of course. Nobody ever admits they're here for the money. You're just like your mother, aren't you? She knew exactly when to sneak in, too. Knox stepped closer, voice low and threatening. Listen up, hillbilly. My dad is dying. Stop bothering him. If you want cash, name your price. I'll pay you to disappear and spare us the tear-jerking father-son act. I clenched my fists, voice shaking with rage. I don't want your money. I want my father. Magnus sneered. Your father? Are you sure about that? Or are you just a bastard trying to grab a share? I couldn't answer. My throat closed up, eyes burning. I turned and walked out of the hall, Magnus's high heels and Knox's mocking laughter chasing me. I sat in my truck, hands trembling on the wheel, tears falling onto the steering wheel. I had known I didn't belong here, but I hadn't expected them to be that vicious. And that was only the beginning. A few days later, every odd job I had suddenly vanished. The construction foreman I usually worked for called, Sorry, Everett, I can't hire you anymore. Someone called and threatened me. The car wash, the diner, the moving gigs all refused me. I was unemployed again. Then the anonymous calls started. A strange male voice distorted through a changer. You think you're clever? Get out of Jackson Hole or you'll regret it. Some nights I heard a car crawl slowly past the motel, headlights sweeping across my window like a searchlight. The worst came on a night of pouring rain. I had just gotten back to my room when someone started pounding on the door. I opened it. Knox stood there, soaked, face red from alcohol. He shoved the door open and barged in despite my protests, yelling loud enough for the whole hallway to hear, You beggar! Who the hell do you think you are walking into the Veilstone house? You bastard! You're only good at bleeding a dying man dry. Neighbors poked their heads out. I wanted to sink into the floor from shame. I tried to push him out. Get out. Stop making a scene. He laughed loudly and pointed in my face. Listen up, trash. Cut all contact with that old man right now. Get out of Jackson Hole. If you don't, I'll have you beaten to death, torch your truck, make sure you have nowhere left to live. Got it? He smashed the only lamp in the room and stormed out, leaving me standing among shards of glass and the curious stares of the entire motel corridor. I collapsed onto the floor, head spinning. I could run, go back to California, resume my old life, forget everything. But then I thought of Alfred, the father who waited for me every day, whose eyes lit up the moment I walked into the room. I wasn't going to run anymore. I had already been thrown out by my adoptive family, abandoned by my wife, and rejected by the world. I thought I was used to being pushed away. But not this time. This time I had a real father who needed me, and I would not let Magnus or Knox take him from me again, no matter the cost. For the first time in my life, someone called me son without a trace of contempt, and I was staying. I decided to stay in Jackson Hole. I left the rundown motel and rented a small one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts, still close enough to drive to the estate every day. Alfred grew weaker by the day, but every time I arrived, he would struggle to sit up, take my hand, and smile. We talked for hours, about the trips he had dreamed of but never taken, about my mother, about the regrets that weighed heaviest on him. He no longer mentioned Magnus or Knox. They rarely showed up, and when they did, they stood in the doorway staring at him with cold eyes as if he were an asset about to expire. I slowly learned how it felt to be loved. I no longer had to count every penny before buying a cup of coffee. Dinner, prepared by the estate's chef, was always hot and plentiful. And for the first time in my life, I could fall asleep without dreading what tomorrow might bring. Alfred introduced me to the entire staff as my son, and in those moments I truly felt the name Veilstone belonged to me, even though it still wasn't written on any official document. But that fragile happiness lasted only 6 more weeks. One early winter morning, the sky gray and snow flurrying lightly, my phone rang at 6 o'clock. It was Charles. His voice trembled. "Everett, can you come right now? The master. He had a heart attack at 5 this morning. The doctors are doing everything they can, but..." I didn't hear the rest. I dropped the phone, ran to the truck still in my pajamas, and sped through the icy roads like a madman. When I arrived, the hallway was filled with people in white coats and the endless beeping of machines. Parker Price stood there, face ashen, and placed a hand on my shoulder. "I'm so sorry, Everett. He's gone, peacefully, without pain." I stood frozen in the middle of the cold marble corridor. Just yesterday he had called me at 10 p.m., voice weak but full of hope. "Come tomorrow, son. I want to tell you about the first time I met your mother." 10 hours later, he was gone forever. I walked into the room, fell to my knees beside the bed, and held his hand, already cold. I cried without sound, my chest crushed as if someone were squeezing the life out of it. The father I had found after 30 years, the only person who had ever loved me unconditionally, had been taken from me the moment I had barely learned to call him Dad. The funeral was held 4 days later, extravagant and icy in true Veilstone style. Magnus directed everything with the precision of a CEO, a walnut casket inlaid with mother of pearl, thousands of white lilies flown in from Holland, a full symphony orchestra playing Mozart's Requiem, guests made up entirely of Wyoming and New York high society arriving in private jets. Paparazzi crowded outside the gates, camera flashes firing nonstop. I stood in the very back row wearing the only black suit Alfred had ordered Charles to have tailored for me. I was not allowed to sit with the family. Magnus had told Parker outright, "Don't let that thing anywhere near the casket." I simply stared silently at his portrait, the gentle smile I had come to know in those few short months, my own eyes red from crying every night. When it was time to place flowers, I walked forward carrying a bouquet of white roses, the kind my mother had loved, he had told me. I laid them down and whispered, "I love you, Dad." Instantly, Magnus's sharp voice rang out from the front row, loud enough for the entire chapel to hear. "Well, look at that. Alfred's final mistake can act too." Knox snorted and added, "Your mother was a maid, right? Like mother, like son, knowing exactly when to pounce." The entire chapel fell silent. Then the whispers began. Everyone turned to look at me, curiosity, contempt, pity, all mixed together. Rage surged through me, blood pounded in my ears, my fists clenched so hard my nails dug into my palms. But I remembered his last words to me. "Don't let them make you lose your composure, son. You are worth far more than they are." I swallowed my tears, turned, and walked back to my corner, seeing my father off in painful silence. A few days later, while I was still drowning in a bottomless void, my phone rang again. It was Parker Price. "Everett, you need to come to my office. It's about Mr. Alfred's will. Tomorrow, 10 o'clock. I hesitated for 3 full days. I was terrified I would get nothing, terrified of being humiliated once more by Magnus and Knox in front of the world. But then I thought, I have to know. I have to know whether my father's love was real or just the fantasy of a lonely old man at the end of his life. On the appointed day, I put on the black funeral suit and drove to the gleaming glass tower in downtown Jackson Hole. The elevator took me to the 28th floor. When the conference room door opened, Magnus and Knox were already seated, faces like stone. They looked at me as if a virus had just walked into their laboratory. Parker Price stood. His voice was calm but carried absolute authority. "Please have a seat, Everett. We'll begin." He opened a red-sealed envelope and took out a thick stack of notarized documents bearing court seals. Then he began to read, every word clear and deliberate. I, Alfred James Veilstone, being of sound mind and body, declare this to be my last will and testament. I bequeath the entirety of my controlling shares in the Veilstone Group, all real estate holdings in Wyoming, Colorado, California, and New York, all investment accounts, trust funds, land, and personal property, with an estimated total value of $2.1 billion. To my biological son, Everett Rowe, born September 14, 1994, currently residing in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Everett Rowe is my sole legal heir. To my wife, Magnus Veilstone, and my son, Knox Veilstone, I leave the two residences in Aspen and Palm Beach, along with $50 million in cash as a gesture of gratitude. I sat motionless, ears ringing, unable to believe what I had just heard. $2.1 billion. The entire Veilstone empire. To me, Magnus shot to her feet, her chair crashing backward, and shrieked, "Fraud! This is blatant forgery. He had Alzheimer's. How could he be of sound mind? That street trash manipulated him." Knox lunged toward me, face purple, shirt collar popping open, screaming and jabbing a finger in my face. You filthy broke parasite. You dare steal the Veilstone fortune? I'll kill you. I swear I'll make you regret ever being born." He grabbed a stack of files from the table and hurled them at my face. Papers flew everywhere. Magnus charged at Parker, grabbing his lapels and shrieking, "Destroy this fake will right now. I'll sue until the end of time." The room exploded into chaos. Other attorneys jumped up in alarm. Security rushed in to separate them. I sat perfectly still, looking straight into Knox's and Magnus's eyes. I was no longer afraid. Parker Price shook Magnus off, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "Mrs. Veilstone, Mr. Knox, compose yourselves. This will was executed 3 months ago, signed by Mr. Alfred in the presence of 2 independent witnesses, and validated last week by the Wyoming Supreme Court. Mr. Alfred was fully competent. We have complete medical records, video testimony, and psychiatric evaluations." He turned on the projector. The video began. Alfred, frail but clear-eyed, sitting in his armchair, speaking firmly. "I know I am dying, and I want to right the greatest wrong of my life. Abandoning my son. Everett Rowe is my only true flesh and blood. Everything I own belongs to him." Magnus went white. Knox froze, mouth open, speechless. Parker shut off the projector, voice ice cold. "This meeting is over. Any disputes will be settled in court." Magnus spun around one last time, pointing straight at me. "You think you've won? I'll make you wish you were never born. I swear it." They stormed out, the clatter of high heels and curses echoing down the hall. I remained seated, motionless. Parker placed a hand on my shoulder. "Congratulations, Everett. You are now the owner of Veilstone." I didn't smile. I only whispered, "He gave me something far greater than money. He gave me the feeling of being someone's son." But as I stepped out of the building and the biting Wyoming wind hit my face, I knew the real war had only just begun. In the days that followed, I lived in a strange state of inner turmoil. Part of me was so happy it hurt, overwhelmed by the knowledge that my father had truly loved me enough to hand over everything he had spent his life building. He had chosen me, even if it was late, even if it was only for a few short months. But the rest of me was so anxious I could barely sleep. I knew Magnus and Knox. They were not the kind of people who accepted defeat and quietly disappeared. They were wounded predators, and I was the one who had wounded them. And they didn't make me wait long. 3 days after the will reading, I woke up to hundreds of notifications on my phone. I opened Facebook, Twitter, Google. My name was everywhere. 89th minute love child steals $2.1 billion from Veilstone Empire. Opportunist appears just as billionaire lay dying. Was Alfred Veilstone manipulated until his final breath? Everett Rowe. From Amazon warehouse worker to mystery heir. They dug up everything. Old photos of me in my faded Amazon uniform were plastered across every platform. Pictures of the foreclosed house in Fresno, photos of Brittany and Zena. God, they had even found our old family pictures. The comments were venomous. You can just look at his face and tell he's a con man. Is he really the illegitimate? Betty sweet-talked the old man to get the inheritance. I turned off my phone, but the news still reached me through television, radio, and the curious stares of neighbors when I stepped outside for coffee. Overnight, I became the nation's laughingstock. From a nameless nobody, I turned into the fortune thief in the eyes of millions who had never met me. Then the letters began arriving. Anonymous, no envelope, no stamp, just slipped under my apartment door. The first was a single sheet. Leave before it's too late. By the third, I can't guarantee you'll stay alive if you walk outside. By the seventh, there was a photo of me with my head photoshopped onto a corpse. I started checking over my shoulder every time I left the apartment. I began sleeping with a kitchen knife under my pillow. I jumped at every car that slowed down in front of the building. One December evening, the cold sharp enough to cut skin, I returned from buying groceries and froze in the parking lot. My beat-up Ford Ranger, the only companion that had stayed with me through every hard year, now lay there like a carcass. Windshield shattered, side mirrors smashed, all four tires slashed deep, and the words trash carved into the paint with something sharp. I knelt among the broken glass, hands shaking as I picked up a note smeared with fake blood. Get out, trash. Next time it's you. I collapsed onto the freezing concrete, mind reeling. I couldn't let this keep escalating. If I stayed silent, they wouldn't stop. They would hurt not just me, but Zena and innocent people around me. I had to do something. The next morning, I put on my only black suit, rented a car, and drove to the Veilstone estate. I didn't call ahead. I just wanted to face them once, eye to eye, and end it. Charles opened the gate, face pale when he saw me. Master Everett, you shouldn't come today. Mrs. Magnus and Master Knox are furious. I walked straight into the cold marble foyer anyway. Magnus sat on the white leather sofa. Glass of red wine in hand, though it was only 9 in the morning. Knox leaned against the wall, hands in pockets, eyes narrowing when he saw me. Magnus looked at me like I was a stain on her white carpet. What are you doing here? Come to gloat? I took a deep breath and kept my voice steady. I didn't come to argue. I came to offer a settlement. I don't want war. I'm willing to give you a portion of the estate. Not a lot, but enough for the two of you to live comfortably for the rest of your lives. Just stop everything. Silence. Then Knox let out a laugh, contemptuous, chilling. Oh my God, the broke bastard thinks he's being noble now. Share the fortune? Who do you think you are, giving charity to me? Magnus set her glass down, voice ice cold. The Veilstone family does not accept handouts from parasites. You want peace? There's only one way. Knox stepped forward until we were face to face, breath reeking of liquor. Sign away the entire inheritance. Get out of Jackson Hole. Get out of my life. Forever. That's the only way. I looked him dead in the eye, voice no longer shaking. No, I will not give back what is mine. My father chose me. If you want to fight, let the courts decide, Cornotut. But I'm done running. The air in the foyer seemed to explode. Magnus shot to her feet and shrieked, Security! Throw him out of my house right now. Knox grabbed my collar and snarled, You're going to regret this, you bastard. I pried his hand off, straightened up, turned, and walked away. Magnus's screams, Knox's curses, the pounding footsteps of security guards, all of it chased me like a storm. I stepped through the massive front doors and the December wind slapped my face. I didn't look back. I had chosen to stay, and I would fight to the end. The trial was scheduled for an early spring morning, when the last snow on the Grand Teton Range had begun to melt and Jackson Hole was bathed in soft, pale, golden sunlight. The Veilstone inheritance dispute had captured the attention of the national and even international media. From dawn, dozens of reporters in live broadcast vans packed the sidewalk in front of the Wyoming federal courthouse. They jostled one another, waiting for the moment the billion-dollar battle officially began. Cameras panned relentlessly, flashbulbs popped without pause, and my name was shouted from every direction. I stepped out of the car feeling heavier than I ever had in my life. I never wanted to fight like this, never wanted to sit in a courtroom haggling over things my father had given me with his whole heart. But I knew one thing clearly. If I backed down today, if I yielded even an inch, the Veilstone family would crush me for the rest of my life. They would never stop, and my father's memory would be forever stained by them. I walked into the courtroom flanked by 2 bodyguards Parker had hired. Magnus and Knox were already seated at the defense table, dressed in expensive black, backed by a large team of attorneys flown in from New York. They didn't look at me, but I could feel the hatred radiating from them like a cold wind. Judge Helen Grant, a woman in her 60s with short silver hair and piercing eyes, banged the gavel. The trial began in an atmosphere so tense it was suffocating. My attorney, David Harlan, stood first. He placed a thick folder on the table and spoke in a calm, resonant voice. "Your Honor, we submit our first piece of evidence, a DNA certification issued by the National Forensic Institute. This document conclusively establishes with 99.9999% certainty that the plaintiff, Everett Rowe, is the biological son of the late Alfred James Veilstone." The document appeared on the large screen. A murmur rippled through the public gallery. Magnus gripped the armrests of her chair until her knuckles went white. Next, Harlan submitted detailed medical reports, records from Alfred's personal physician, the Mayo Clinic, and 3 independent psychiatric experts. Every report concluded that in the 3 months before his death, Alfred James Veilstone had been fully lucid, alert, and of complete legal capacity. Parker Price rose, his voice clear and unwavering. "We submit audio and video recordings of Mr. Veilstone's true final wishes." The screen lit up and my father's voice filled the courtroom. "I want to leave everything to Everett, my son, because I missed 30 years of his life." There were dozens of such recordings, each accompanied by notarized affidavits from Parker and Alfred's personal assistants. Everything proved beyond doubt that the will reflected Alfred's genuine, uncoerced intent. Then it was the defense's turn. Magnus and Knox's lead counsel stood, voice shrill with accusation. "Your Honor, my clients contend that Alfred Veilstone was mentally manipulated in his final days. The plaintiff, Everett Rowe, appeared at the precise moment Mr. Veilstone was most vulnerable and exploited his emotions to force the creation of this will." He pointed straight at me, voice rising. "This is an elder abuser who preyed on a dying man's illness to steal his fortune." Knox leapt to his feet without permission and screamed, "He's a con man. He killed my father to take his money." The courtroom erupted in noise. I clenched my fists under the table, nails digging into my palms to stay calm. Parker placed a steadying hand on my shoulder and whispered, "Everett, stay calm." Their attorney demanded the will be re-examined in its entirety. Judge Grant glanced at the files and immediately shook her head. Request denied. All documents were properly notarized by a state official, witnessed by living individuals, and recorded on video at the time of signing. There is no legal basis for doubt. A heavy silence fell. You could hear the wall clock ticking. Judge Grant reviewed the file one final time, then looked up. Her voice rang through the room. "Having examined all evidence, testimony, and documentation, this court rules that the last will and testament of Alfred James Veilstone is fully valid. Mr. Everett Rowe is hereby declared the sole legal heir to the entire Veilstone estate." The gavel fell with a sharp crack, like thunder ending a storm. Magnus collapsed back into her chair, face drained of color, clutching her chest and gasping. Knox slammed his fist on the table, veins bulging in his neck, face crimson with rage. But he could do nothing. The judgment was recorded, permanent, irreversible. Outside the courthouse, the press exploded like fireworks. Headlines raced across television screens and social media. Veilstone Empire falls to son hidden for 30 years. Inheritance reversed, from warehouse worker to billionaire. Illegitimate son defeats tycoon family. I pushed through the swarm of reporters lunging like wolves, answering no questions. Parker clapped me on the shoulder. "You won, Everett." I only nodded. Inside, I felt no victory. I drove back to the old rundown apartment I had kept. I sat by the window, quietly watching the little street where the melting snow dripped from rooftops and weak spring sunlight fell across the worn floorboards. From a homeless man with nothing, I had become the owner of a $2.1 billion fortune. But there was not a single spark of joy in my heart. I saw only one cruel truth. Every tragedy, from the family hatred, my father's death, to this bloody legal war, had sprung from money and the bottomless greed of human beings. My father had died simply because he wanted to right a past wrong. I had nearly died simply because I wanted to hold on to the last love he ever gave me. And Magnus and Knox had lost everything simply because they could not accept one simple fact. Blood cannot be bought with money. I looked out the window and whispered to myself, "Dad, I won. So why do I still feel like I lost?" 3 days after the trial, I wanted nothing more to do with the Veilstone name, nothing to do with those 9-figure numbers weighing on my shoulders, nothing to do with the prying stares from strangers every time I stepped outside. I met Parker Price one last time in his office in Jackson Hole. I told him straight, "I want to sell everything. The company shares, the real estate, the investment funds, sell it all." Parker looked at me for a long time, then nodded. "Are you sure? This is an entire empire." I gave a faint smile. "That empire killed my father. I don't need it." The sale happened quickly. Major investors swarmed like sharks to fresh meat. Within 6 months, all that remained was an enormous but clean pile of cash, enough to live 10 lifetimes without ever working again. But that wasn't what I wanted. I wanted to start over with my own 2 hands. I left Wyoming without looking back. I drove my old pickup, the one I kept even though I could now buy a fleet of supercars, west toward the Oregon coast. I chose a small town called Cannon Beach, where the Pacific Ocean pounds the shore day and night and morning fog wraps everything in a soft blanket that hides the past. I bought a small cedar-shingled house on a hill overlooking the sea. 2 bedrooms, 1 living room, an open kitchen and a wide wooden deck. Just enough for a man who had once lost everything to find peace again. I started a home renovation and repair company. The name was simple, Rowe and Daughter Renovations, because I knew that one day Zena would come home to me. I did everything myself, building furniture, painting walls, laying floors, fixing porches. The first few weeks my hands blistered from the power saw and my back ached from lifting, but I was happy, truly happy. I earned my living with sweat and my own strength, not with numbers on paper. The people in the little town gradually got to know me. The new guy. Solid work, doesn't talk much. I smiled at them, shared a beer after jobs, and for the first time in my life I felt like I belonged somewhere. The simple life by the ocean healed me little by little. Mornings I woke early, brewed black coffee, and sat on the deck listening to the waves. Afternoons I walked the beach, picked up seashells, let the salt wind blow the painful memories away. At night I slept deeply. No more nightmares about Magnus, Knox, or threatening letters. I learned to live slowly again, learned to forgive myself for ever believing I didn't deserve to be loved. Then one autumn afternoon, leaves turning gold, when I came home covered in sawdust, I saw an old car parked in front of the gate. My former family stepped out. Reed, Cora, and Finn. They looked thinner, worn out, clothes shabby, faces hollowed by hard times. The moment Cora saw me, she burst into tears and ran to hug me. "Everett, my son, I'm so sorry." Reed stood behind her, eyes red, voice hoarse. "Son, we were wrong. We've fallen on hard times. The house was foreclosed. Please help us." Finn forced an awkward smile and slapped my shoulder. "Big bro, you're rich now. Invest in a couple of my big projects. I've got killer business ideas, just need some startup capital." I stood still and looked at them. No anger, no hatred, just distance. I listened as Cora sobbed about their debts, Finn's gambling, Reed's illnesses. When they finished, I simply shook my head. I stopped being your son the day you threw me out like a stray dog. I have nothing to do with the Rowe family anymore. Please leave. Cora cried harder. Reed stared at the ground. Finn muttered curses under his breath. They got back in the car and drove away. I stood in the yard feeling a strange lightness. That door was closed. Forever. A few days later, another car pulled up. Brittany stepped out holding Zena's hand. My little girl had grown so much. Long hair, big round eyes staring at me in wonder. Brittany lowered her head, voice trembling. I was wrong, Everett. I destroyed our family. She needs her dad. I need you. I looked at the woman who had once been my wife, who had left me when I was at my lowest. I felt only distance, like looking at someone from a past life. I will always need Zena, I said slowly, but I don't need you anymore. You chose to leave when I had nothing. Now I have everything and I still don't need someone who turned her back on me. Brittany choked back sobs, tears streaming down her face. She picked Zena up and walked away in shame. But a few days later she came back. This time she said nothing, just placed Zena in my arms and drove off, cold and almost fleeing. Zena looked up at me, voice tiny. Daddy? I held her tight, tears falling into her curly hair. I'm here, baby girl. From now on, it's just you and me. I brought her inside. I taught her to listen to the ocean, to collect seashells, to understand that love can't be bought with money. She smiled more, slept better, and I found my reason to live again. I closed every door to the past. The adoptive family, the ex-wife, the lawsuits, the grudges. I no longer hated. I simply lived for the present. For mornings filled with the sound of waves, for Zena's laughter echoing through the little wooden house. For days spent working with my own hands. I had paid for this peace with my entire youth. But now, sitting on the deck watching the sunset paint the ocean crimson, I know I have finally found home. A real home. Not built with money, but with love. And for the first time in my life, I am truly free. I closed every door to the past, the adoptive family, the ex-wife, the lawsuits, the grudges. I no longer carried hatred. I lived only for the present, for the early mornings listening to the waves lapping gently at the foot of the hill, for Zena's bright laughter ringing through the little wooden house, for days spent working with my own hands, sweat dripping onto fresh pine-scented floors. The new life slowly found its rhythm. My renovation company grew in reputation, not through flashy ads, but because of the old houses I brought back to life. New roof tiles, sparkling windows, walls painted in warm colors. Word spread among the locals. That guy Everett in Cannon Beach, solid work, never overcharges. I smiled when I heard it. I didn't need to get richer. I only needed enough. One winter evening after Zena was fast asleep, I sat by the fireplace with a mug of hot cocoa. I opened an old notebook and wrote down a single name, Alfred Veilstone. I decided to set aside a portion of the inheritance, not too much, just enough for the fund to run sustainably for decades, and created the Alfred Veilstone Foundation. It would support orphaned children and young people abandoned by their families the same way I had once been a child with no parents, treated like a burden. There was no grand launch, no press, no glossy photos. I did it quietly. Because I know those kids curled up in orphanage corners, those young men wandering the streets. They don't need camera flashes and long speeches. They need tuition money, 3 meals a day, a temporary roof, and just one person to tell them, you are not alone, and you are not worthless. I often took Zena with me on the charity trips. She was 7 now, eyes shining whenever she saw younger children. We drove to Portland, Salem, the forgotten corners of Oregon the news rarely mentions. Zena wrapped gifts with her own hands, hugged strangers, and asked me in her serious little voice, Daddy, why don't they have moms and dads? I held her close and answered, because life isn't always fair, sweetheart, but we can make it a little fairer. I wanted her to grow up with a heart that aches for others. Compassion, that is the greatest inheritance she can carry through life, not the numbers in a bank account. One cool autumn morning, maple leaves blazing red along the road, I took Zena to Jackson Hole for the first time. We visited the cemetery where my father rests. Alfred Vailstone's headstone stood quietly beneath old pines, engraved only with his name and a simple line, "A father who found his son." I laid a bouquet of white roses, the flower he said my mother loved most, then sat on the grass, running my hand over the cold stone. Zena curled into my lap and whispered, "Is this Grandpa? Can he see me from heaven?" I smiled, tears rolling down my cheeks, but this time they were tears of relief. "Yes, baby. He's smiling right now." Standing before his grave, I silently thanked him. Thanked him for having the courage to find me and accept me. Thanked him for giving me the most precious thing I had never known. The feeling of being loved unconditionally, without judgment, without comparison, without contempt. The painful memories of the past, being scolded, despised, called picked up trash, no longer broke me. They had become lessons that taught me the true value of kindness and treating others with the respect I once longed for. I realized a simple but profound truth. Money can buy houses, cars, power, even fear from others. But it can never buy sincerity. It can never buy a family that truly loves one another. Magnus and Knox lost everything because they believed money was everything. And I, though I once had nothing, now have everything that matters. A little girl who laughs every morning, a home filled with the sound of the ocean, and a clear conscience. I teach Zena that every day. When she asks, "Daddy, why don't we buy a bigger house or more toys when we're rich?" I hold her and say slowly, "What makes you strong isn't how much money you have, but how much you've been through and still kept a kind heart that doesn't hurt others." Looking back on the road I've traveled, betrayal, abandonment, humiliation, contempt, then suddenly inheriting a vast empire, I understand that every fall was a lesson. Every wound led me to where I needed to be. Without those dark days, I would never have cherished this peace. Without those tears, I would never have known how to wipe someone else's away. If anyone out there is listening to my story, a child huddled in an orphanage, a man just left by his wife, a son just disowned by his family, let me say this. Never underestimate your own worth. Never let people who don't love you define your life. They can take everything material, but they can never take away your ability to stand up again. Your ability to choose kindness, your ability to love yourself. In the end, I hold Zena's hand and walk along the beach in front of our house. The waves lap gently at our feet. The sunset paints the sky and sea crimson. Zena runs and laughs, seashells sparkling in the evening light. I stop, breathe in the salt air, the scent of freedom, the scent of peace. I have left all the pain behind. Ahead of me there is only love, kindness, and the people who truly deserve a place in my life. And I know, no matter what life brings, I will never lose myself again.